So, in this episode of my podcast, Girl with the Camera, I want to know how you started. Okay, so I want to inspire young filmmakers and I want to hear your story. My first question would be when did you decide that you want to become a filmmaker?
For me, it's a very funny story because I think when I grew up, I thought I'm probably going to be an actor or maybe a director. I used to write plays and even do imitations and put on shows in school and high school. But then it faded away. I never really dabbled with it anymore, especially not in my army years. And during that time, I always dreamt about being a film critic, if you would believe that. I was so obsessed with films and, watching films and analyzing them that even in my yearbook of, when I was 13 and I entered my elementary school, they wrote that everybody, they tried to do a future forecast for every student. So they're putting in 10 years from now, where will you be? So in my yearbook, it's written that I will become a film critic and probably a film teacher. And by the age of 24, I managed to do both. I became a film critic in Israel and also a lecturer at the university where I studied. So that was it for me. I thought I'm living the dream. They were paying me money to watch movies and they and talk about it with my students. And that was beautiful. And then I think a couple of years later, I taught a course about film theory of all things. And one of my students was Navot Papushado, who later became my partner. So it started by him luring me little by little into helping him do his student projects. And then when he finished, or by his third year, after he did his graduation movie, which I produced, he asked me what's next. So I told him, we're talking all the time about Israel needs to make genre films and Israel needs to make a horror movie, because we never had those in Israel. Somebody needs to, do that. So I told him, let's stop talking about it and maybe, you do it. He said, okay, I will do it only if you're coming with me. And I said, no, I don't want to be involved. I have not an easy life. I'm a critic. Leave me alone. So it was coming week after week, and he tried to. At the beginning, he said, "Just write it with me." Then he said, "Just cast it with me." And at the end, he said, "You already did everything. So just direct the movie with me." And I found myself on the first, Israeli horror film set. And I directed it with most of my students. I took all my students, which always wanted to make horror films, but were afraid nobody will, allow them to do that. Mm-hmm. So I took all my, freshman year students together with my ex-student. My DOP was my student, my first assistant director student, everybody, except the actors who were the biggest stars of Israel. And I'm talking the Tom Cruises and the George Clooney's of Israel, all in the first Israeli horror film, which had a shoestring budget. They almost did it voluntarily. And, that's how I came to do the first one. And it became a huge international success. We've been to Tribeca and lots of festivals and good, reviews everywhere. And it made a lot of money for my producer. And he asked me to do another one very quickly. And then I sat down and, wrote Big Bad Wolves, which became even a huge success internationally.
Quentin Tarantino said it's the best film of the year. I mean...
Yeah, well, he exaggerates all the time. So, well, it was nice. It was very nice to hear that. So we were flattered and we were still, it's still amazing that the man, one of my idols, my biggest idols, sits down in a cinema in Korea and of all movies picks our movie and loves it and talks about it. And it opened a lot of doors for us. And then, everything changed.
So your first film that you made with your students was a huge success. So basically, would you say the journey was easy for you?
No.
Exactly.
No.
So can you tell me some of the...
First, we were, dumb enough to say, we had a producer who didn't know anything about horror movies, right? So we just read the script and liked it and said, and we didn't want to go through the funds, the government funds, because that takes years. So he said, I will pay. How much do you need? We said 200K, let's say. And he said, okay, you have 100K, like half. How many days of shoot would you like? So we said 20. He said, no, you're going to get 10. Then we lifted up to, 15. But that was it. So shooting, 90 pages script on $14 in 14 days in 100K. And we wanted to make a lot of these shots in long takes. So that took a lot from us, and we were like, we didn't know what we were doing. We honestly made things on the fly, and it took time in the editing. I will not lie; it was like a very rough journey because we really invented a lot of things, and we tried to think outside of the box and break all the conventions of the horror genre in one movie. So it took us a while to get the pacing right and everything that we wanted to have in that movie. And we didn't have time for reshoots or money. So everything that we did, we just stuck with it and now, try and do your best with it. So that was one of the obstacles we had with Rabies. And again, we made a film that we were sure that Israel would fall in love with, right? The critics and everybody in Israel would fall in love. Well, the first critic was, Rabies is the worst Israeli movie ever made. It was written by one of the harshest and most respected film critics in Israel. It's like, if Theo Scott wrote it about you in the New York Times, like you're dead. The older and respected film critics didn't like the movie, except for another guy who was even more respected, who loved the movie and offered a very nice and deep dissection of the movie. But it, like in Israel, it wasn't a huge hit. It was like, okay, for a horror movie, we were one of the most successful horror movies. But as a movie from Israel, it didn't do a lot of business, right? But then, and we thought the movie is dead, right? It's over. Game over. We tried, we failed. It's okay. So you win some, you lose some. Let's go back to teaching. You go back to, I don't know, become a mailman, right? And then we got invited for a Portuguese film festival. And, it's not a big festival. It's Fantasporto. It's only people from the genre circuit knows it. But people told us it's a great festival. It's a great screenings. It's great. There are great screenings over there and great crowd. Go and have fun. So we went there, on a whim. It was a beautiful, sold out, 800 people in the crowd, loving the movie, writing about the movie. The movie got a sales company at the same festival. Everybody was talking about it because it did so many things with the genre. And then we won out of all awards to win in that festival, we won the Critics Award, right?
What an irony.
So you're awful film directors in Israel. You're the greatest in Portugal. And then while we were there, we got a phone call from, Tribeca. Where's your movie? And we sent it like 3 months ago. So they went through their boxes to watch it. And then they watched it, and a couple of weeks later, we just got accepted to Tribeca, and it did amazing. Like Variety wrote about it, great reviews everywhere, Screen Daily. Again, became a huge phenomenon. Then we did like 70 festivals, and that was it. Like, so it was hard making it. It was hard distributing it in Israel, very harsh. But then I always told my students, and that's the thing I believe most. Every movie has a journey and a life of its own. You may start as the worst movie ever made in Israel, but end the same year, as one of the best genre films in that year by international standards. So, that's what I learned about with Rabies and it with every movie.
You went for a feature film right away. So you didn't even start like, let's make a short film and then go for the feature.
I learned theory, right? Theory and in my film school. I did not have any practical experience. I think movies will teach you more than film school. If you're attentive and you read a lot and you see a lot, I do think that that's the best school you could get. I learned most of my knowledge come from watching movies from age 4 till today. I'm watching a movie a day every day. That's my routine, at least one movie a day. And I also dissect it at the end of every, I watch it and then I have to dissect it. Even now, I'm not a film critic anymore, but I write about every movie almost I see. I post on Facebook some like thousands of words on a movie just to keep myself engaged and learning the strategies and the philosophy behind every movie I love.
When you make a feature film and of course you have now bigger budget available because you have the name, you have something behind you, so you have the budget and you have investors. And should you think about marketing success, or should you just literally do what you want and see whether this is going to be accepted?
Every filmmaker has his own personality. So what I'm saying is right for a guy like me, which, they live by carpenter is like a Bible to me. So I see, I need creative control and I need that. And so when a guy comes to me or a girl and asks me, what movie should I be making? I will tell him, always make the film that you would like to watch. It's the simple answer I will give anybody. I will only make movies that entertain me, because I never know what's the new trend or when would people get enough of John Wick kind of movies, right? Now it's the holy grail. Everybody wants a John Wick.
Yeah.
But in 5 years, once you finally get to do your movie, right? You write your John Wick and you're happy. I have the next John Wick. And then by the time your investors comes and your actors come, it could take 5 years. And then you make the movie, but it's out of fashion. Nobody wants to see another John Wick. So I will never tell anybody to make something based on fashion or trends, because you don't know the trends. And you can only know what you like to watch. So if you're an indie filmmaker, which I tend to be these days, more than, somebody that likes to be a Hollywood director, kind of, big budget, big projects movies, I will tell you, try to write whatever you feel is right for you. That if you go with your friends to the cinema, you would laugh, you would cry, or if it's an action film, it's a big, crazy action film that only you and your friends will like. Because at the end of the day, you will be living with your movie for the rest of your life. Now, if you make a bad movie, like if you make something that you love, right, and everybody says it's bad, but at least at night you could say, well, but I got to do my. If it's good, then win, right? It's a win for everybody likes it. You like it, it's a win. But if it's bad, according to people, at least you did what you love. The worst case you could do is that you make something you don't believe in, and then everybody says it's shit, right? Because then you lose them all. So that's for people of my personality that needs to sleep well with their, conscious at night, that they didn't sell out. They didn't do something just for the sake of making money. Now, another girl or a boy will come and say, I would like to make money. I would like to make, I just want to make a living out of this, and I want to be rich. And I will tell these people, learn the trends, learn what's hot right now, right? Because I'll give you an example. When I did my first tour in Hollywood, I was like green and I didn't know what to say. By my second tour in Hollywood, I already know what you need to go and say in every room in order to get a deal. Like I knew that if I would come into a meeting with a remake I would like to make, and I said the name of a movie, and the movie would sound reasonable to the executives over there, I would probably get a development deal right there in the place. And that's what happened. We went to Sony, we pitched Vengeance, the French film by Johnny Tall. And at the end of the meeting, we already shook hands and we had a deal. So, and it gave us a lot of quiet because it was like a really smart move fiscally. So, it depends. Like I would tell the dreamer, dream. I would tell the people who are practical, be practical, learn the market, know exactly what they're looking for. Right now it's the age of superheroes, remakes, sequels, of course, the John Wicks study it, study the rules. And if you want to get something done, that's what they're looking for right now. If you want to have like an independent voice and something, that would blow minds, well, just know that you need to write on a budget. And that's what I did with my new movie for Jason Sudeikis and Evangeline Lilly. I knew nobody will never let me make homage for the movies of the 60s and the 70s with a slow pace and crazy, things happening for 10 or 20 or 30 or $50 million, but I knew I would not get that kind of money. So what you do, you just need to write within budget restrictions, that once you could get $3 million, which was the budget for my recent movie, then it's a greenlit movie, and then you don't need to cast Jason Statham or Keanu Reeves or the biggest names that aren't reachable because they do so many movies a year. And then you could, turn into Jason Sudeikis, that was before even Ted Lasso, and you get a green light if he likes your script. And so that's my advice, that if you want to make your own kind of movies and they're not sitting within the system of Hollywood, just look for what's right budget-wise. Like if you have a great idea for a one location movie, if you have a great idea for two locations, if you just look for something that would be fiscally reasonable, and then you probably get to make it. If you're trying to do, and we tried, like with South of Heaven, we tried to make it for 10, we started with the thoughts that we could do it for 10 to $12 million. But then there's obstacles, they come up with lists, and you need to take this actor, and you could not take this actor, because if you take this actor, then you have only $1 million budget, and it becomes this list thing. And then, it's just horrible. But then you understand that you don't need to do it for 10 or 12. It's just, it's a wish. You can do it for less. And then instead of waiting 5 years, you just do it within a year. So always try to think about the movie you want to make and find a way to do it. I won't say as cheap as you can, but as a striving first-time director, you should think about making a movie that is not dangerous money-wise, and I believe that. Because once you show a success, it's more important than anything you write on page for everybody. Like, financiers, production companies, they only look on the bottom line. Yeah, sure, they can love your movie, but if it lost them money, then you will not get that second chance so fast. So for me, with Rabies, Big Bad Wolves, and even now with South of Heaven, 3 movies that were made in a very low budget, and they will never lose money because of that. So they will all be conceived as fiscally successful, and people would like to do business with people that don't lose money for them and gain money for them. So it's very simple. Like we want to make art, but they want to make money. So it's an interesting business, cinema. It's both things live together. It's art and it needs to be successful. So they take their part, you take your part, nobody loses and everybody's happy.
What is your writing process if you write your own story and screenplay? Do you prefer that, like if you direct the film, you want to, of course, direct your screenplay, or you wouldn't mind directing anything if you like it?
I think, no, I don't mind directing script by others. I think naturally I wrote my first script because I felt in Israel nobody could write or even thought about writing genre films. And that's another advice I'll give everybody that comes from places that are not the US. Always try to make things that doesn't try to compete directly with US films. Try to bring your own culture into your movies. Like I made a movie called Rabies, that's a slasher movie, but I try to ask what would an Israeli slasher movie would look like. Just as Edgar Wright tries to ask in every movie he did in the Cornetto films, what would an English zombie films would be like? And that's why it's funny. And that's why it's exotic for the Americans, because if Edgar Wright would try to make Shaun of the Dead the same way all the American movies look like, they would not notice him. Same for Hot Fuzz and end of the world, only because it has the British culture into them that the American critics and audiences and festivals love it so much because it's different. Same with Guillermo del Toro and his Mexican trilogy, and same with us. And that's something I need to say. As for writing, I knew nobody could write an Israeli film that will dissect the American genre, but would bring something very Israeli into it, because you need to know all the rules for an American horror movie before you break them. And not a lot of people love horror films in Israel. It's the least loved genre in Israel. We're big on comedies and dramas. We're less keen to see a horror film, or anything that deals with fantasy is frowned upon because we are a very realistic country. So I needed to write my own scripts because I taught courses on horror and I did, seminars on it. So I just knew whatever needed to be broken in a movie and how to jump from it to the next one. But I'm not against working with other writers. I think I'm all for collaboration. I'm not sure my next movie will be something I write. It might be, but it just needs to be good. I don't think anybody should. And I know that that's a very big disease that I spotted when I was teaching, that everybody needs to be an auteur. Everybody needs to direct his own scripts. And I always told my students that that's the biggest mistake they're going to make. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because sometimes you hit a block, right? You don't know what to write next, but you are a very capable director, and you're avoiding being on set by just trying to write when you have a block. And the second reason is that sometimes because you're not so obsessed with your own writing, you could spot something beautiful in another person's writing, and that would lead to a very fruitful collaboration. And sometimes it will yield an even better script that you could have achieved by yourself. So I would never advise against collaborations. I think that's shooting yourself in the leg. People could make 5 films if they directed somebody else's script while waiting for their perfect script to be written in those 5 years. So I think it depends. If you want to make movies, especially when you're starting up, I think you should not lose 5 or 6 years of your life waiting for your, script. And if you have an opportunity to make other people's scripts and direct them, that will make you a more capable director because you'll have the mileage. It's really, I learned it on myself. Like, first one I did was 2010. Second one I already finished after 2 years to direct it, right? But then we wrote a couple of scripts, like 4 scripts. None of them came to life. And we just, passed on lots of films that have been made in Hollywood and even in Israel, just because we wanted to make our own stuff. And both of us, although we split, made our films in 2021. So it took us 8 years because we just wanted to be sure we're making our own shit. And that was a mistake that I will never make again. If a script is good, I'm going to make it. I don't care if my name gets a credit as a writer. I just, if you love the set and you live on sets, you need to go there as fast as you can.
I've seen your trailer for South of Heaven. I felt Tarantino from it. It kind of like, I'm literally have no idea how it's going to end and what's going to happen in that film. So it makes me really keen on watching it. And
that's the way I write. I try to, surprise myself. And like I said, I really want the viewer to be surprised. And I'm looking at myself, like what I would like to, see on screen. And I thought it would be crazy to make a movie that starts off as a romantic drama and then become this very dark and brooding film. And which also have bursts of laughter. So yeah, it's crazy movie, I guess. Yeah.
And when you write, do you know the end already, or do you start writing and then develop the ending?
That depends on the movie. I think with this one, I knew the ending. I knew the beginning and I knew the ending. The middle was the harshest part on this one. I also knew the ending for Big Bad Wolf. If you believe it, it was even darker in my mind than I have a darker version of Big Bad Wolf in my head that didn't make it to the script because it was far too harsh for the viewer. It was chaotic. Like all the process for Rabies was chaotic, and I think you can see that result on screen. But yeah, it depends. I never think you should know the ending. I think you should allow yourself the process of finding out if that's the right ending. You could have an ending, but you need to let the journey dictate where you need to end your film. Because sometimes you think, oh, I've got this amazing ending. I had it in Big Bad Wolf, right? I thought I had the perfect ending. But then when I started writing it, and I understood the tone of the movie, and it was like between dark comedy to a very horrific revenge story, and I knew that ending was too dark and too macabre to anybody to digest it. It was just too over the top. Like if I was in Korea, I'm sure that would be my ending because they would swallow it whole and say that's the greatest movie ever made. But I knew that we're going first with Israel, and I knew that the audience were like, we're out. We're not going to watch this movie. That's the worst.
So, and the last question would be maybe a difficult one. I don't know. Do you think people still will go to the cinema 20 years in the future?
Well, I'm an optimistic about everything except myself. So I think everybody talks about the death of cinema every now and then, 20 years ago, 50, like when the television came in the 50s, they thought it was dead. Then CinemaScope arrived and revolutionized everything. Now, because of the streaming, everybody thinks it's dead. Look, I'm going to the cinema. It's a different experience. The only thing that changes, I don't think the cinema changes. And I don't think streaming will change cinema. I think what changes is the psyche of the human being. So it all depends if people need to have communal experiences in life, or we're going to become bubbles. And that's my biggest fear. Like every day I'm going to sleep, and that's my biggest fear, that because of the streaming, or more than the streaming, the internet, maybe people just don't feel the need to be immersed together in one big experience. Now, I know that when they allowed people to go back to cinemas, there was like a peak for a moment, and everybody thought, oh, we're back. And then the numbers getting down and down. So I don't think cinema will change. I think cinema will be alive. I do feel it might be coming something else, like only grand, big scale movies like the Marvels one will survive and become this attraction. And I hope that, boutique cinemas will make sure that the cinephiles would have like a week of watching the art house movies before they went into streaming. Right now, I'm very pessimistic because of the 2 years we're living it. And there's like a whole bunch of movies that cannot be even shown on the big screen. There's like, nobody knows what's right or what's wrong. So everybody's panicking, especially in Hollywood. They're like, in Hollywood, it's like, oh, it's dead. Like it's red alert. Everything is like, so there are hysterics over there when it comes to movies. We need to see, for the last couple of years, adults were buying a lot of tickets, like the very old population.
Yeah.
The 50s, 60s and above, they were going to all these movies about, old people, and they made specialty films for old people, and they were a very big driving force of the market. Now those people don't go to the cinema, right? So the art house and indie movie circuit have like a low, admission rate, and that's very alarming, because the younger kids, which are the driving force today, don't care about the indie cinema. They care about Marvel. They will go to Jurassic World Part 3. They'll go to every John Wick. And those movies will still be with us and probably big hits. I'm just scared for those beautiful movies and art house movie and, foreign films. Parasite made more than $40 million, and even won the Oscars. I don't see that happening today. I don't see a Korean movie coming out this year and making the same, noise as Parasite. Like Titan, Wong Kar, the same as Bong Joon-ho. I don't see it making the headlines the same way. I don't see him repeating that huge success. So there is a change. And I hope 20 years from now, it will be better than these days, and film will survive, because I do think it's the most marvelous experience you could offer a person. I think there is a big difference between seeing it on your TV screen, even if it's a 60-inch TV, than going to the cinema and seeing people reacting to the screen. But who knows,
Yeah. And unfortunately, some of the films we can watch on our phone.
That I can't hear that. Like, I know it's happening. I know people are watching films on planes, even on those shabby little screens, but
it makes you want to cry. But yeah, I mean, we can't change it. We just have to accept it, I guess. Yeah.
Once I saw Dunkirk with a guy on a tube watching it on an iPhone, I knew it's done, right? It's over. Like if Nolan was on that train, he would probably smash that phone. But that's the reality.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you so much. It was absolutely great and insightful and helpful to my viewers and listeners. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.